Music is.
Okay, welcome to the Supply Chain Digital Days. This is the beginning of a 2.5-day conference about supply chain management and resiliency. Today, we're going to talk about supply chain management in China, as well as transport between China and Europe along the Belt and Road with Jean-Claude ORTEGA. Jean-Claude, could you introduce yourself and your company, please?
Yes, good morning to you. My name is Jean-Claude ORTEGA. I am the CEO of a company called BBA, specialized in transportation from China into Europe, specialized at the upstream part of the supply chain. We currently move everything from aerospace to automotive and pharmaceuticals from mainland China into Europe via all the different routes, either by ocean, by train, by road, or by air. And we've been in charge of the air bridge from China into Europe regarding the sanitary crisis that we all faces, and in moving face mask from China into France with a very dedicated and complex supply chain that we designed in a very short period of time, moving more than 1 billion masks from China. So the topics today is around understanding what will be the post-COVID supply chain constraints. How do we see the supply chain challenges around inventory levels, and how China today see that new organizations. The main challenges we have is to really unbalance the inventory levels and the stock levels we all have in France or in Europe regarding China, which is today our main supplier. We would say that China remains our tier 1 suppliers in Europe. Whether we talked about raw materials or finished product, productions is mainly done there. The question is, how should I base my stock levels before the COVID and after the COVID? Shall we see China as the main sourcing market? Looking at a crisis like that, is there any alternative to China to source somewhere else and avoid the situation we all faced? And indeed, what should be the cycle times that we should implement after the COVID? Right. We all know that from basically China into Europe, we talked about 10,000 kilometers half away, which is quite a significant distance. It is covered mainly today by ocean freight, which is really a lead time port to port around 30 days. Then goes the train. Train is today mature enough with 22 trains a week to Europe and from Europe to China. So we talk about back and forth, 44 trains a week. Then we have the road freight that we initiated during the COVID, which is basically a full truck leaving China into Europe. It goes from areas like Shanghai into Hamburg in 15 days, door to door, including customs clearance lead times and so on. And then we have air from China into Europe being indeed the most expensive ones, but the shortest in terms of lead time. So the question is today, how should I raise my inventory after the COVID? And what will be the cycle times that we need, of course, to put in place?
Well, before we get too much into details, could you tell us a bit more about the situation in China as it is right now? China went through the COVID like the rest of us, but they did that before the rest of the world. I'm assuming they're reopening operations before the rest of the world. How are things currently as far as production, as far as logistics, transportation inside of China, in the different harbors, different ports, different airports? What is currently the situation? How well is the country functioning right now?
Well, China today works 100% in regards to productions, in regards to transportation by ocean, by train, and by road. Air is a bit complex today because what we call commercial airlines, as you know, all unfortunately on ground and will remain till beginning of September. So air is currently moved by only charter aircraft mainly, or commercial airlines moving freight only and not passengers. The passenger flights are very limited up to next September the 1st. Ocean works today almost normally, train as well, and road freight as well. The main challenges that China is currently having is being, of course, supplied by Europe in components, because China is today a production country where some of the components are coming from all over the world. They manufacture and then they ship out. So even if the production in China is totally operational, they are still suffering a lot about the components that comes from Europe and US to manufacture the product we need. And of course, delays and lead times increase today by more than 30%. So China is really depending on what they produce, but on the components being, of course, supplied to the various OEMs in China.
So how long do you think it will take for things to get back to normal? When can the Western companies expect things to be back to business as usual in China?
Well, it very much depends on the business verticals. If we talk about the aerospace industry or the automotive industry, of course, it will be a different scenarios. What we see is that it's going to be for general cargo or electronics components and so on. We see something coming back to normal in the area of September and October. Aerospace won't come back to a normal situations not before the end of the year, knowing that normally the US should open again by September the 1st, and then the airlines will normally come back to a normal situations by September. We also are very much depending of what we call the second waves via the COVID, how the situations will be next autumn, especially in China. But if the signals continue the way it is, we see productions coming back to normal from September to the end of the year.
Okay, so from that point on, I suppose companies will be curious to know what are the alternatives now in terms of transportation, in terms of possibly rethinking their operations. What would your suggestion be for Western companies that are trying to get things as fast as possible from China, let's say to Europe, let's say to Germany, France, that side of the continent? What are your recommendations?
My recommendations will be first to rework the inventory level that we need and review the transportation plan we design to fit the inventory level that we estimated before the crisis. Looking at the productions today in Europe, we could see an increase around 10–15% per month roughly, and that of course should be integrated into the new post-COVID transportation plan that we should put in place. Ocean freight, which is today roughly around 60 days, won't bring the visibility in terms of inventory that the productions needs. I do think that we should see in the next transportation plan a switch between air to road freight to train, and train to ocean. It is, I think, very strategic for production in Europe to put in their transportation plan the 4 modes of transport. We know that in Europe today, we don't use that much road transport from China into Europe. It's something we don't know. It's something that we are afraid of, but it works pretty well. The customs are done at departure. The customs are done at the country of destination. There is nothing in between. All the countries that are crossed via a truck are not stopped via the customs. The trucks are sealed, and the lead times is pretty short. It is indeed more expensive than the train, and the ocean, but comparing with air freight is almost 10 times cheaper than air freight when it is a bit longer, according to the poor capacity China has today out of all the various airports into Europe. Ocean maintain their full capacity, so ocean will stay what it was before, and train are today pretty congested. With the level of inventory we have today, a lot of industries are replanning their inventory and try to move faster as they used before, and moved a lot by train. We've seen that more than 1,000 trains have been booked so far by block trains or by, of course, the general train that exists from the various stations in China into Europe. So I think that for the next months, and I would say until the end of the year, lead time will be very crucial to reconfigure the inventory level to the level it should be.
So how available is road transport? You mentioned road transport, you mentioned rail. We know that 90% of merchandise comes by boat. Are there limitations? You mentioned some limitations in capacity. Is that something that companies can really plan on and depend on, or do they need to be mindful of how much availability there is in terms of road and rail transport?
Absolutely. Just to put some figures there, ocean is roughly from 12 to 14,000 TEUs per vessel. So in full truck, it means something around 6 to 8,000 trucks per vessel, knowing that we have weekly departure per vessel from China into Europe. Train is only 45 trucks per train, unless you book some block trains, but it's only 45. And of course, road, you're not that much limited, considering the number of trucks that you have out of China into Europe. Air remains also important, knowing that 48% of the global air freight volume today is being shipped by full freighters, and full freighters are not affected by the crisis, but we still have 48% of the air volume from China into Europe loaded on passenger aircraft, which are today on the ground and will remain till the beginning of September. So the capacity by air is impacted by 48%, and that will remain till the end of October. Road capacity is phenomenal, but is expensive as well. Train is limited in terms of capacity, and ocean is basically back to normal working conditions.
Okay. So when it comes to choosing between those different modes of transportation, what are the main things that a company needs to take into account?
Well, they need to think about cycle times. Cycle times is the key. I mean that the transportation cost within the supply chain, when we look at the SCORE model, supply chain operation reference, divide the supply chain in 5 modules: plan, source, make, deliver, and returns. The delivery modules within the supply chains, consisting in moving in and out, logistics and transportations and customs clearance, represent only 7% of the supply chain cost. Of course, the inventory value is the key in the cycle times as well. So what we should normally do is to reduce as much as we can our inventory levels and increase the inventory turns for a better working capital. Moving ocean with roughly 60 days in front of us will bring us to a huge inventory, knowing that the demand won't be there yet. So the decision that I think will be made is that the inventory level will be reduced, impacted, and the inventory turns will increase tremendously. Today, it is better to order 5 times 1,000 pieces than 1 time 5,000 pieces. So consolidations around ocean freight or other by air will become, I think, a bit dangerous for the coming months, because we don't know what we have to face in terms of demand. The demand will increase roughly by the area of October, November. So until that date, people will have to adjust their inventory in reducing their cycle times. So buying less per order, but increasing the number of orders they're going to get.
Is that something that can easily be done with transportation companies? I'm thinking, you know, train, there are specific dates. They only leave X number of times per week. How do you manage that?
Well, basically today on another management basis, what we should look at is really the expected ready dates at the production gates and what will be the required on-site date. This should be breakdown per week, even per day, depending on the industry. And a transportation plan should be designed based on that. The first should be designed by ocean, then by train, then by road, and then by air. But the demand will have to be splitted through these four modes of transport, rather playing only ocean, and if we are late, by air. Because train is important, but with 45 containers per train, the capacity is really limited.
How bad is it? Suppose that a company is planning on moving some freight by train. You miss the train by an hour. What happens? How bad does it impact your operations?
The beauty of the train is that we have 22 trains a week, basically from China, from the main gateways in China being Yiwu, Zhengzhou, Shenzhen, Beijing. 22 trains a week means that several departures a week. So we have roughly a daily departure. So if we miss the train, we can get the next one. The issue is not really having not enough frequencies, is to have the visibility to book a train at least 10 days before the departure. And that is the issue, because when you have a limited capacity like that, it does push a lot of pressure on your planification modules and make sure that you're going to get the right visibility to plan a train within the next 10 days, where people today are suffering about visibility. But if you miss a train, and the next ones have been booked, you will have basically to take a ticket and follow the line. So it does put pressure on your planification modules.
I'm thinking, what about reliability? You know, we're used to, I mean, companies in the US are used to the way it works in the US. Companies in Europe are used to the way things work in Europe. How reliable is transportation, whether by road or by train in China? I mean, I'm guessing by train probably a little bit better, but is it really reliable if we're trying out road transportation between China and Europe? Are there certain companies that maybe we need to be aware of that are big national companies that are maybe more robust than others? What would be your guidance?
Reliability is a good question. Train and from train station to train stations, lead times are good. Trains are on time. Service is almost good. The thing is the pre and post deliveries. When the train arrives in Europe, we are talking about quite a large regions with like 750 million consumers in Europe and a lot of road freight within the European community. The train mainly arrives in Germany. Germany is important to us, is important to the French. We sell 3 times less than we buy from Germany. And the number of trucks available from Germany into France are extremely limited during peak seasons. So if the train arrives on time, unfortunately, the access to trucking resources from Germany into France or other countries are very limited. To give you a precise idea, last year from the 26th of September till the 8th of October, no trucks were available from Germany into France, unless you were willing to pay a fortune to get available trucks. So the the door-to-door supply chain on train very much depends on the pre-transport and the customs clearance that you have in front of, and then the post-deliveries, which are really affected by the number of trucks available at the European market. On road freight, it is basically the same truck that leaves China and will go directly into Europe. It's only the crew, the driver's team that will change through each individual countries, but the truck remain exactly the same. So we have the access of the capacity, and there is a lot of truck, as you can imagine, out of China into Europe. So the capacity is not there, and there is no stops or no handling in and out in Europe before the delivery. It's like a non-stop door-to-door solution.
Right. So out of curiosity, is it the same driver or same team of drivers, or how does that work?
No, it is not. You can imagine 10,000 kilometers with 2 drivers. That will be a very long way. Now, so they change at each border. The crew is changed. So when the trucks arrive in Europe, it's done via a European team. The only thing that won't be touched is really the goods, and the trucks are sealed through what we call a tier carnet, which is kind of transportation, bonded transportations authorized by all the country crossed, and then the customs won't open the trucks until the trucks arrived at the final country of destination.
And is it your job as a freight forwarder to assure that this chain of events and that each driver,
our role as a freight forwarder is to really manage from the time the orders are ready until the time they are delivered, either by ocean, by air, or by road, or by train. Our added value is to provide daily track and trace for the trucks. There is a daily tracing in place with a GPS tracking on them. So every day we know exactly where are the trucks. We get pictures on GPS pictures on where they are. And since we picked up the cargo until the time the freight is delivered, we know exactly what will be the estimated time of arrival. And so far, from the number of trucks we moved, we didn't face any delay, even during the COVID crisis.
And do your customers have access to that information?
Yes, we provide the information to the customers, and also we need in Central Asia to also take under consideration that from China into Central Asia, we talk about 7 days lead time, and then from Central Asia into Europe, then we can also ship by ocean, we can also ship by air, reducing the lead time, reducing the cost. So shipping from China to Europe, you also have a way to stop halfway in Central Asia, in Almaty, in Kazakhstan, as an example, and then ship from there by air and on a charter flight, as an example. That will be far less expensive than moving directly from China into Europe, with a lead time that will be around 9 to 10 days, which is quite competitive.
Okay, you mentioned earlier mixing the different transportation modes. Are you thinking of a specific company having a mixed transportation plan with rail and road and boat, or possibly even air? Is that what you recommend?
Yeah,
depending on the category of products, maybe?
That should be the added value of the freight forwarders we are, is that depending on the transportation plan, we need, of course, to fit that with the production plan. Most of the times we don't get access to the production planning, and then without the production planning, you can't really decide whether you should ship by ocean or by train or by road or by air. I think that it is up to us to determine the appropriate transportation plan according to the production plan, which is sometimes unknown, because sometimes we all know that productions are delayed by lack of resources, raw materials, quality issues, and what we think a production plan is unfortunately, it's never deployed the way we think. So it is crucial for us to align the production plan with the transportation plan and going through the 4 modes of transport, which are today available.
So are there specific industries choosing specific modes of transportation, or is it all over the place?
No, it is really all over the place. I mean that there is, anyway, in transportation, there is always a risk. I mean that moving parts 10,000 kilometers away from the final delivery point, of course, does represent a risk. But in terms of transportation today, either by ocean, by road, or by air, the risk is very well taken under considerations. And so far, we don't face that much issues in regards to quality, pilferage, and things like that. Today, the transportation mode are really robust. They are safe enough to make sure that the goods arrive on time and safely. Today, the service level turns around 98, 99%. So it is very high today quality level.
Okay. One thing we haven't mentioned yet is the cost, freight versus air freight versus boat versus rail versus road, as well as CO2 emissions. I'm sure there are huge differences between all these modes of transportation. Could you maybe advise us on, what we're looking at in terms of differences between these different modes of transportation?
Yeah, in terms of carbon footprint, indeed, the air freight is by far the most demanding. An aircraft is not a vessel. Of course, ocean freight will be by far the less demanding. So according to the speed and the lead time, you have a carbon footprint by air, which is 10 times higher than by ocean. And of course, train is indeed the less demanding in terms of carbon footprint. So in terms of carbon footprint, train remain the best. However, capacity is really limited. Then we have road freight, and then you have air freight. So you're roughly 10 times higher by air, 5 times higher by road, and by train it is, of course, 8 times less than air freight.
Carbon footprint, you say?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, so a company has gone through the coronavirus. Things are getting back to business in Europe. How do you decide from now on? You mentioned your inventory levels. What's the best way to operate? Companies have essentially too much inventory these days. Are they picking a slower mode of transportation while waiting for things to come back to normal? And what do you recommend they do in the future? And moving on, learning the lessons we have from COVID-19, preparing for a better, more efficient future.
Well, we can see that the inventory level today, depending, of course, in the industry, but some of them are really running out of inventory. Don't forget that China, who is today the tier 1 supplier of Europe, is more or less out of production since January the 15th, where it was the Chinese New Year, then affected by the COVID, and then the production went down dramatically. So most of the time, people, of course, increase their inventory to face the Chinese New Year, and then wait after New Year to replenish their inventory. We've been out of productions for almost 5 months in China. So people now are running for increasing their inventory, and they are planning to move by air a lot. We've seen during the COVID an amazing amount of freight that has to move. I know China market for more than 30 years. It's the first thing in my life that I see that the 4 main airports were totally saturated by air, because we need to replenish, we need to produce now, and you need to have the components you need to restart your productions. And air freight is really extremely demanding, either road and train and then ocean. So we have today within the industry we cover today, which are around high tech, which are around automotive or the aerospace industry, they all work with 4 modes of transport today. So we ship by ocean, we ship by train, we ship by road, and we ship by air the remaining parts that needs to cover the gap between the train and the road, or the road and the air.
Is that a way to adjust your stock levels, or is that?
Yeah, yes. I mean that with the air freight, you can digest like 1, 2, 3 days productions until the road freight comes, and then until the train comes, and then until the ocean freight comes. And that's how the inventory are replenished today.
Okay. Does the type of product also have anything to do with the choice in transportation? For example, maybe higher value-added products will be shipped more by air because you can afford it. Lower value products, lower value-added products will be maybe shipped by ship or vessel or rail, or does that come into the equation?
The value of the product, on the upstream part of the supply chain, is not the key components. It's the finished product that you're gonna made at the end of the productions. I mean that if you are buying screws in China and you don't have them, unfortunately, you won't be able to produce. And we have seen that, the PPE, the mask, the face masks, and so on, you won't be able to produce if you don't have them. So even if it is a very low value, those low value materials will have a significant impact on your production. So the upstream value of components and raw materials should not be dictated to a transportation mode. Is exactly what will be your production plan to make sure that the finished product will be done on time. And it is the cost of the finished product and the cycle times you need to produce it that will fix the mode of transport for all the upstream components that you need to move.
So it has more to do with how critical the product is rather than the market value of the finished product.
Exactly, because you have different, depending on the product, you may have from few part numbers to thousands of part numbers that you need to move in before producing your finished product. And they need to be, of course, segmented by criticity, by level of risk, and by mode of transport.
Okay. Are you seeing new companies now coming and asking for guidance, asking for your services, or is that not happening yet? How is the market evolving and reacting to the situation?
Yeah, clients are coming to us, and we publish every Monday a situation out of China of the capacity released by ocean, by air, by road, or by train. And every Monday we guide them about the solution they have out of China. And what we see today is that China and their tier 1 suppliers are today fully operational, as I said. But the thing is that the productions or the distribution centers in Europe are not yet ready to digest the productions and then distribute the final product to their consumers.
Right. Okay, so we're just about to run out of time. Any words of wisdom in terms of how to prepare for tomorrow, what to expect tomorrow? Now, let's say we're not going to have a huge second wave of coronavirus in the fall and things are going to get back to normal, but we still want to be ready and to be flexible. What does a company need to know and be aware of, think about right now to be ready for the future and to be ready for essentially anything, to be more resilient in the future? What would be, as a conclusion, your words of wisdom?
Well, the key thing is really to rework our planification modules in the supply chain, and our fears for all of us are around supply chain disruptions. We have seen through the COVID, and what we learned is that a sanitary crisis could have an impact that we never, ever imagined before. Half of the populations being blocked in, that never happens. And whatever the percentage of safety stocks that we have in our models to move parts or to produce parts will be significantly impacted by a new sanitary crisis, and how we should prevent our production centers of having situations like that. We tend to believe that some of them will source in different country, in different geography, to make sure that they won't be that much dependent of one country. We see China, but a lot of others are also new suppliers now are investigated in Southeast Asia, such as Indonesia, Vietnam, or Thailand. China invested a lot in Southeast Asia. We see Foxconn as an example, who used to have 800,000 employees in the area of Shenzhen, outsourced today a lot in Indonesia. So even China today is trying to diversify their productions country within Asia, and Southeast Asia is also a second way of producing for them. And we will see within the next months that new productions will come out of Southeast Asia, and not only China only. So taking under consideration supply chain disruptions of that level will certainly drive us to increase our safety stock, to review certainly our lot number, producing or ordering less per order, but increasing the number of orders. We all aim to reduce our inventory level by increasing our inventory turns. And I think that for all of us, that will be the key words: increasing your inventory turns. That is the key. Instead of having inventory turns at 3 or 4 per year, try to increase the inventory turns as much as it is technically possible to do it.
Increase rotation. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's it for today's session with the BBA and Jean-Claude ORTEGA. Thank you for coming with us. The next session will feature Mohamed Rida Mfadel, who will be speaking about logistics in Morocco. And I would just like to remind our viewers, in case they didn't know, that the Agora Managers Club is organizing the Startup of the Year contest. And the lucky winner will be chosen by the viewers. We are asking you to cast your vote. Voting starts at 5:45 today, GMT +1, and will last through the duration of our event. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Jean-Claude.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Music is